It's myself.
Wow, we're live. Hey, it's Jeff Pulver together with Andy Abramson, and hey, we're talking vCons. How are you, Andy, and how you been?
I'm good at 6 a.m.
6 a.m. somewhere. It's 9 a.m. somewhere else. It's all good.
I know. When I heard it was at 9 o'clock in the morning, I said, okay, for Jeff and only for Jeff, I'll get up and do it. So I'm here, and we're going to talk about what you and I love to whisper loudly about, which is all about vCons.
Yes, the virtualized conversation. So it's like it's been a while now. We've been on the vCon roadshow and traveled around the world speaking vCons, and we're at a point right now where I think people are starting to hear the term. They don't necessarily know what a virtualized conversation is. They may not recognize it when they see it, but when you look at businesses and you look at conversations, the ability for things to be remembered and trusted and create that memory, I think is something which is transformational and is going to change things. And so, from your perspective, the vCon Whispers perspective, how do you help people understand the value of vCons in business? Like, what's your pitch?
I think you need to look at that vCon is conversational memory. That's the easiest way to think about it. That we all tend to have convenient memory lapse at times. Well, I don't. I have a photographic memory, and
you have perfect memory.
I know. Thank you. I do, and that sometimes upsets people because they like to have convenient memory rewrite, like they've edited in their mind what really happened. Well, the vCon is that memory tool. Number one. Number two, a vCon is trusted. Number three, a vCon can be just between the people who had the conversation, or it could be part of a permanent record that's used somewhere. We're getting to the point where devices, services are all around conversation. People are writing less. They're having less what I'll call standard forms of communication. If we go back over time, people talked. Then there was the printing press. Then there was the letter that went in the mail. Then there was the fax machine. Then we had email. Now people are back to talking. Why? They're on
TAWK talking?
Talking, TALK. And, we're on dial pad meetings calls. We're on Zoom calls. We're in a Microsoft Teams meeting. And all of those calls now are being transcribed. But where's the memory? And that's where vCon changes it. vCon puts in conversational memory, the ability to find what was discussed, pull it back so you can remember it, so you can share it if you have permission to. So I really think of vCons as our new notepad for verbal communication and more. Text messages fall into that. Chats can fall into it. But what it does is it gives a standardized way of bringing it back and keeping it secure.
And when you bring it back and you could chain together conversations that we've had from email, from texting, from video conferences, even when you and I are in the same sessions at a conference, if you could bring that all back into a saved memory form, we're capturing more things than just a conversation. We're really capturing what was said and when, and hopefully we could trust it because we can verify and validate that we were the parties to the conversation. We can identify what was said, how it was said, and we can decide to share or not to share. And the nice part about the compliance element of what's baked into vCon's ability is that, Andy, you could say it's okay to share this today, and 3 days from now you can pull it back, and you could share a conversation, ask for it to be redacted, and we will confirm that a conversation took place between these two parties. The content of the conversation is not being shared, just the confirmation that the talk took place. And so, when I look at the term unified communications, which was used and abused for, 15, 17 years, I do think in the age of the vCon, how people sell and explain unified communications must change, because we're talking not necessarily even about how conversations come into a company, But what happens to conversations inside of a company, and being able to standardize and store that information for history and for the value of what was said, I think these are treasures you never really could take advantage of before, and it's kind of cool. I believe it's transformational.
Well, you bring up unified communications. The only thing unified about communications was the fact that somebody sold a bunch of services as one. When you really think about it, they were very disparate. They were, not necessarily integrated. The call didn't necessarily bring up the email or the text or whatever else was there. You may not even have had your text messages in the same application as you did your voice communication, and your conference calling was not necessarily related to your phone number, other than a few companies that did that. And so it wasn't really unified communications, it was unified communications applications as a service, all under one umbrella, which, I guess I added another A to the whole UCAAAS. But then again, I'm always big on AA. So anyway, when I look
I
at,
think we need communication anonymous. I'm sorry.
yeah, well, that's I'm Andy Abramson, so I'm used to the double A.
You are the
But-
double A. Okay.
So the whole thing, when I look at, and if our producer can bring up the slides I quickly threw together over the weekend, that we have here. I don't know. Do I have to do anything more?
I know you're sharing. They're sharing. I do not know.
I've
We
never
have,
done.
we have an invisible producer in the sky.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. I think we got it now. Oh, I've tapped it. How do I go live with it? It says it's on stage, so someone needs to turn it on.
That'll be our producer.
Yes. There we go. All right. So when I look at where we are with vCons, and give all kinds of kudos to our good friend Thomas Allen and Dan, who spent many months, I don't want to say days and hours.
Look, Dan Petrie and Thomas Howe have been working on this for years.
Yeah, for years. This is really, I think, the year that vCons get real. It's the year the standard moves to become an actual standard from a proposed standard or proposed specification with the IETF, and that approval is going to lead to what I refer to as the vCon innovation surge. It's where all types of ways of looking at compliance, analytics, and how you build in the conversation into AI tools get built, all based on a common standard, much like how email works, or how calendars are supposed to work, or how data interchanges work. And because it's open source and nobody owns it, that's right, Thomas and Dan don't own it, they're open sourcing it, it's going to lead to a lot more interoperability across various platforms, whether it's UCAS, CCAS, the AI ecosystems, and other forms of conversation. I mean, if you look at what everybody's talking about, what John Ivey and Sam Altman are building, we're changing the interface. I've been on this big kick lately that the interface of what we're looking at, a screen and a mouse, are going to go bye-bye. I mean, if you look at the new glasses and the gesturing, we're entering a world of visual, voice, and gesture. And the vCons work very well with all of them, because if there's conversation or a visual, it captures it. So the seamless integration across all types of systems driven by this new surge in technology caused by AI. I really believe that that's going to be both a regulation, and standards are going to be the basis of this, because compliance is the driver and also the challenge. Jeff, a little over a year ago, we were in London together, and we had a panel with Alan Durick and Dean Bubley, and I forget who else was on it, and you and I, as I moderated, and we were all about the Digital Millennium Act, the Digital Services Act, and vCons were not even a driver back then, but they could have been, and they could have been a center part of the conversation, because when you're over in Europe with the GDPR, just like the California Consumer Privacy Act, here in the US, you've got compliance at the basis of everything. But in doing so, you've got a melange of compliance that all isn't the same. but with vCons, it will be.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that in November 24, I believe, is when the ITF meeting was in Dublin, and I hosted two meetups, two vCon meetups, one in Dublin and one in London. And in the Dublin meetup, a friend of mine who's a CTO of one of the largest call centers in Europe, he came to the meetup very happy, very excited to be there, and he left rather grumpy. And I asked him what was up. And he said that, well, before I walked in the door, whenever the EU told me about compliance and about how I had to manage the data in our data center, I knew that there was no technology on earth that could possibly help facilitate the compliance issues that the EU has. And so I knew that we didn't have to do anything. I leave here educated and upset because now I know there's a solution. It's called vCons. And
so now he actually has to do some work around it.
Yeah, he was not happy. I mean, it's funny. You'd think education enlightens people. In this case, it made him grumpy because now he understood for the very first time that there is a way to be regulatory compliant for GDPR when running call centers in Europe and managing customer information. And that not so surprising that the IETF working group for vCons sit regulators, so that it was created from the ground up. It wasn't rearranged, disconnected, reconnected. It was built to be compliant from the ground up. And so that provides a lot of gravitas to having, really for the first time in the history of computing, what will become a recognized standard for conversations. And a lot of ecosystems, whether you're Microsoft Vonage, whether you're dealing with Google, different companies will tell you they have semantic search across their messaging platforms. But what vCons do, it allows you to export the conversation so that you can go from one system to the other and have that cross compatibility. Because whether you're in a small company or a very large company, it's very rare for people to have end-to-end the same platform. And particularly if you're dealing with customers across multiple platforms, how do you do that? And so there's a lot of information, and there's that intertwine about compliance. And in the communication side, I mean, whenever we used to have compliance sessions at Vont, people fell asleep. I have to tell you, they didn't find it exciting. But when you recognize that in the last few years, something like $4 billion worth of fines have come through just in the US for compliance issues dealing with AI, I don't think you're going to be rolling your eyes at this stuff so much anymore. Do I have your attention now?
That's why I wanted to make a point of why compliance matters. And the people are going to be with us today and with us next week at IT Expo when we have various vCon meetups. Compliance around vCons really matters because we're getting structured consent management. That means it's not just acknowledging that you'll allow the call to be recorded, that was obtained, but you'll have it dated, how it was obtained, from which side, for what purpose, and with what limitations. For example, the Major League Baseball for years, you say this broadcast is delivered today under the exclusive right of Major League Baseball and may not be in any way recorded, distributed without express written consent or something like that.
Yeah, we've heard that.
That's structured consent management. There's also audit trail completeness. Organizations and individuals can demonstrate their compliance through now what is an immutable record of all data handling operations surrounding the vCon, surrounding that asset, that speech to text asset, that verbal asset, that data set asset. They now can show that there's an audit trail around this, when it started, when it ended, where it was stored, etc. You have automated PII redaction. You can set things up to remove sensitive information. No more will people hear, "Hi, I'm Jeff, and I'm a voiceaholic," and that's they won't hear the word aholic. So that sensitive portion of a message, or when you're giving your credit card number or your social security number, even the last 4 digits of it, that will be preserved but made invisible or redacted, which is real important. And what's so funny about this is when I was CMO of Phonative with Steve Smith, we had built a lot of this into our contact center technology because we were dealing with medical information and financial information. And then there's the last thing, which is really important, which is when the IETF, the International Engineering Task Force, emphasis on the word international, vCons have the ability to be geographically data resident. And that's real important because you have to support where the data is stored within a specific locale or jurisdiction, maintain the global capabilities of a vCon, but also respect the local regulations. I talked earlier about GDPR, Digital Services Act, Digital Millennium Act, California Consumer Privacy Act, what you've got going on in New York and Virginia. We don't have in the US a federal standard that would apply to consumer and business privacy. It just doesn't exist. So, when I also was looking into what's going on, because I actually sat back and said, tell me what's going on with vCons over the last 60 days. And I have to admit, not much.
Oh, I mean, there was a little bit, and the MCP stuff you're talking about here. There are two working groups.
That's the biggest thing. The MCP, Jeff, is the thing right now.
No, but they're doing the vCons have been integrated with MCP. They're doing MCP over SIP, MCP over vCon.
Correct.
It allows the companies to have local MCP servers in their architecture, which is really big.
But my point is, when I was looking for who's doing things,
well, I mean, just last 2 weeks ago, when I was in Florida at Cloud Connections, Allianz's CPO, Dag, he came out and said that they're using vCons in their fabric, which is pretty cool. And it's exciting because that he makes, one of, well, it was rather loud announcement that vCons are being used at Allianza, which I was really excited to hear. And as I'm working on Spring 26 vCon, which is in Dallas at the end of March, not only did I invite Dag to come talk, I'm really excited about where this is going to go, because I do think that we are seeing a very subtle shift of this going mainstream faster than we know. On the vCon Foundation meeting last week, there were two companies there that I had no idea were doing vCons. And my follow-up conversations with them is, yeah, and we're in production.
And that's what I'm saying, that there needs to be more. We're doing our part to bring vCons to the forefront. But these people who are doing things with vCons need to be doing more than just showing up at the Cloud Communication Alliance conference and talk about it, because that's a group of people who all talk amongst themselves. And we need to have more public awareness of what's going on. The MCP, the Model Context Protocol that started with Anthropic, which is now going to find its way into the IETF, which everyone from Google to OpenAI, even though they're all competitors, are embracing, is creating a standardization for how all the AI assistants can integrate vCons and other things. I was going through last night looking at the number of MCP portal companies that are all putting together ways of connecting and keeping MCPs up, because a big problem with the MCP protocol is its stability if you're on the wrong server. So now there's services companies popping up, much like reminding me of the old days of co-location. Well, with an MCP, a vCon can talk to almost any application. And because you've got people like Thomas building an MCP server and putting it into things like Conserver IO, you're going to really drive into some of the key benefits that can come from utilizing vCons in the world today. It's very important that we look at how those advantages. Organizations can implement vCons with support. They're going to get a lot of advantages. They're going to be positioned for long-term success. And you've got everyone from Anthropic and Mistral to OpenAI and Google all having local models. It doesn't change business logic. It's like having a universal API gateway connecting all kinds of AI applications to other tools. I'm talking CRMs, I'm talking services, I'm talking databases. Now you have centralized tool management, but most importantly, you have vendor independence, you have deeper integration, you have what vCons are all about, governance and audit, and we have reusability. So I'm very excited, and this is why Thomas and I were talking about the whole need for MCP support 7 months ago, and it's there. And Stralid, or vConic as they're now called, they're doing things like this. I'm happy to hear that Dag Peak and Todd Carruthers and the folks at Alianza, everyone who doesn't know who Alianza is, they supply telecommunications capabilities to many of the smaller cable companies across the world and satellite companies as well that need voice connectivity. So when you see this and you hear that someone like a Dag Peak, who's the CTO or CPO at Alianza, is embracing vCons, you know it's coming. And obviously, if you're supplying small regional cable companies, I'm not talking the Comcasts or the Spectrums or the Coxes like that. I'm talking the smaller companies like size 10 and below, because cable in the United States is very concentrated. That's a lot of people calling customer support. And what the vCon does is it lets them standardize that record and attach it to the customer file. It's really important. It gives them that governance and audit trail, but also what it gives them is stability and reliability.
And I think one other key point before we close out is that I big statement for me, but I believe that the introduction of vCons in business has the potential of being as impactful, if not more, than the introduction of spreadsheets in business in the 1980s. And I'll tell you why. Because I happen to have spent 8 years of my life running a company called Spreadsheet Solutions, and what people may not remember is that back in the 80s, after the introduction of the personal computer, there were 3 major apps that changed things: spreadsheets, database, and PowerPoint presentations. And I went deep. I was right out of college, and I used to write assembly language code to basically extend function functionality in spreadsheets, and then I built turnkey systems using the macro programming language. And it wasn't just me. I was a speaker. Lotus Development Corp had a developers conference, and I would every year, I'd say we spend a week in Boston at the Mecca at 55 Cambridge Parkway, or wherever they designated to be the place for Lotus Week. And there's a very actually long historic relationship between the early vCon conferences and my takeaways from attending the Lotus developer conferences. And I believe that we have at least a fabric for vCons to be the reusable content for an entire new ecosystem of application developers to come in and take their magic and apply it to the vCons that are there, granted with permission of the people who own those vCons. But the idea anyway that, Andy, with all your perspectives on how businesses work, operate, and all the different verticals that you literally could publish as many applications as you want that use those vCons. So can I. Now we're in the age of the internet, tens of thousands of other people. So I'm imagining an app store of sorts to come in, where if you're working inside of a company and you're looking for how to analyze your information, while your IT department could build it, you could also look at all these other third parties that are doing wonderful things with vCons. Because back in the 80s, there was no internet, commercial internet. So everyone's sort of stuck in their own vertical, in their own, in their own area, and they had to build. And now I think this truly can be transformational. So I do think we have the potential to inspire people who want to get into this AI generation of business to leverage the MCPs, build the vCons, capture those conversational buckets, and then be creative and solve problems today, whether you're in a large enterprise, medium enterprise, or small business.
You're absolutely right. And I look at the MCP server as the API era on steroids. That everything you can do with APIs, you're now going to be able to do in many cases with MCPs, unless you want to do a deep direct integration. And who wants to do a deep direct integration with 10,000 different applications? So you put your MCP out there, someone connects their application to it, you pick the right MCP gateway, and you're off and running. And vCons provide that fabric of continuity and consistency that whether you're on application 1 or 2 or 3, whether it's a database, a spreadsheet, an email, whatever you're attaching it to, it's the same thing. There doesn't need to be a translator. You don't need a piece of middleware. So why are we so excited, and why are we doing what Nike loves to do, which is whispering loudly about vCons? Because 2026 is the year that the vCon gets real.
There you go. Getting it real, keeping it real with Andy Abramson and the vCon. And so, Andy, if people want to follow up with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Well, you can follow me on andyabramson.com. That's where I occasionally write about vCons when there's some news to write about. I also write about other things there, my views on just about anything that's going on in tech, AI, telecom, even wine and travel from time to time. Or you can send me an email at ceo@communicano with one M, COMUNICANO.com. Or better yet, show up at a vCon Foundation meeting. Where Jeff is, I'll be, and we'll be there making sure that everybody's hearing us whisper from the rooftops. No, shout from the rooftops how
Just
important vCons are.
I love that. Well, we're going to be in IT Expo next week, the week of February 9th in Fort Lauderdale. Hopefully it'll be, you're in Vegas. It's always warm in Vegas, but up here in the Northeast, it is.
Well, Jeff, that's a real important point. I'm here in Vegas. There's two major conferences coming up in Vegas. There's Channel Partners and there's Enterprise Connect. Now,
yes,
if you're in the industry doing something with vCons, reach out to me. And I'd love to hear what you're doing.
It just reminded me as we close the show that I'm going to look to you to be hopefully help host or co-host some vCon meetups, because I'll be at Enterprise Connect. I'll be at Channel Partners. We should do something in Vegas while those events are taking place, because the vCon Foundation's on the road. And
I know a great deli right down the road.
We got to do it. Well, hey, thanks for joining us today. And I'm Jeff Pulver, Andy Abramson, and this is the vCon Revolution, and we're on our way. Thanks. Thank you all. Thanks for tuning in. Roll it, producer.